Hello, thanks for joining me in this discussion about cyber fraud and how it affects our business at Ingram Micro. My name is Bob Slencak, and I'll be having a conversation, a discussion today that will hopefully be educational and a little bit fun. So let's get started with our agenda for today. Just a few items that we're going to talk about. First things first, though, we'll cover some introductions, let you get to know who I am and what information security is all about. Then we'll talk about cyber fraud and we'll define it so that we have a common understanding. And then we'll discuss the impact both globally and locally. Then I'm going to introduce you to a real world hacker, somebody that I looked into many years ago in my past life in another occupation. Lastly, though, this will be the most important part because it covers what you can do to help us at Ingram Micro to protect the company, and it'll also have some thoughts on how you can protect yourself at home. So a little bit about myself. I've only been here at Ingram Micro for a couple of years. So prior to that, I spent a significant amount of time in federal law enforcement. And so for many years, I worked for the United States Secret Service. I also worked for the National Park Service. While I was at the Secret Service, I was part of a program where we were all trained in digital forensics and incident response. And so through my involvement in that program, I was able to be engaged on many cases, both supporting federal investigations as well as state and local investigations where we were called in to do digital forensics or assist in incident response. When I was with the National Park Service, it was a little bit of a different environment. Obviously, we had the most beautiful crime scenes on the planet, but I also worked in technology there trying to assist the park rangers as well as the National Parks Investigative Services Program integrate technology into their investigations. So that's my background. And from that background, we're going to talk about a hacker that I investigated some time ago. So information security, it's kind of a nebulous phrase that gets thrown around a lot, but who are we at Ingram Micro? Here we've broken our information security team into 4 large groups. Other companies may do it differently, but this seems to work for us. The first group I want to talk about is the Identity and Access Management Group. They, as their name suggests, manage all of the access to our systems. So when a new employee is onboarded, they're the ones that get their information, provide a username and temporary passwords so that they can access the systems that they need. They also get them set up with multi-factor access. They also transfer access to systems as associates change roles. So while an associate is in one role, they might need access to a certain system, but moving to another role, they no longer need that access, but something different. So they close out access to the previous system and allow them access into another system. So a very important part of what information security does is managing access to various systems and parts of our network. The next team I'd like to talk about is the security architecture and engineering team. They play an important role in working with information systems to develop a secure network and to ensure that the tools, all of the tools and applications that we bring into the organization are secure as they can be, and that everything integrates in a secure manner. That's very helpful in the concept of defense in depth, where we try to have many obstacles preventing a hacker from getting to our most important resources. Development, security, and operations, most commonly known as DevSecOps, is another group that we maintain, and they integrate with our development teams and our operational teams to make sure that what they are developing is as secure as it can be. They bring in the best practices, for secure application development and assist the teams developing applications. So the last team is the security operations team. That's my team. And we handle the Security Operations Center, also known as the SOC. We also have the Security Incident Response Team, or CERT, and we also have Security Communications and Awareness. You can think of the SOC as the 911 center for network security events. So if an associate detects some sort of security event is going on, they can call the SOC, they can email the SOC, or they can submit a form to report the incident to the SOC. The analysts in the Security Operations Center will take that report or data from our tools, our security tools, and evaluate whether the report or the event requires additional investigation. And if it does require additional investigation, they can do a certain amount. But then if it's requires a substantial amount of investigation, they turn it over to the incident response team, which performs digital forensics, log analysis, and works with the owners of the applications or systems where the event is going on to remediate the problem, whatever they determine it is. The last group that I want to mention is our Security Communications and Awareness team, who manages all the communications coming out of the CISO's email box, and they do all of the awareness training. So the quarterly training that everyone attends on information security comes from them, as well as the monthly newsletter. So that's information security in a nutshell. So let's talk about cyber fraud. Cyber fraud is also called cybercrime. Those names are interchanged quite frequently. Cyber fraud is a blanket term that describes a variety of crimes committed by cyber actors on the internet. We can break cyber fraud into two large categories: cyber-enabled and cyber-facilitated. Cyber-enabled fraud is fraud that can only occur through technology and on the internet. So an example of cyber-enabled fraud would be ransomware. In ransomware, you have malware that gets on a system and encrypts all of the data. The attacker then sends you a ransom note, conveniently, asking you to pay in usually a digital currency like crypto coin to get your data back. That could never have occurred in the physical world prior to the advent of technology and the internet. So then we have cyber-facilitated crime, and cyber-facilitated crime could have occurred in the physical world before technology occurred. So an example of that is an older scheme such as the advanced fee fraud. In those scenarios, someone could receive a letter or a phone call from a person purporting to be a government official in a foreign country. And that person would usually claim that their victim is due millions of dollars and they just need a little bit of money to pay for the facilitation of getting those funds transferred to the victim. So the fraud is that there really isn't any money due the victim. They just collect, $1,000 here or a couple of $1,000s there to help facilitate the process, and the victim never actually gets any proceeds. So cyber fraud is, encompasses a broad variety of crimes, and we have those two basic groups that we break that crime down into. So now it's time to introduce you to a hacker. Somebody that I investigated many, many years ago, who went by the hacker nickname of Nightmare. So the hackers seem to like to give themselves a nickname, or what's commonly referred to as a handle. And you can see from the slide that it's a combination of numerals and letters that have a resemblance to the word nightmare. So he was a bit of a headache. I don't know if he was a nightmare or not, but he was certainly a pain in the neck for a period of time. When we first found out about him, we didn't really know very much about him. We didn't know what he looked like or how tall he was or any of those kinds of things. As time went on, though, we found out that he was a fairly young man who was located in the Midwestern United States, and he was operating from a small town, actually. And one thing that I think we know about hackers is that they all wear their hacker hoodies. So the little picture of him with the hoodie here is kind of representing that. So we were alerted to Nightmare's activities by a company who picked up on what he was doing, and they supplied information to us that we were able to take some action on. Once we started taking action, we discovered that our friend Nightmare really did three things. First of all, he became what was called at that time a bot herder. And it's a little bit of an antiquated term. We don't hear that as much these days. But what he did was he gained control of hundreds, actually thousands of computers that were connected to the internet. These computers were servers, they were PCs in people's homes, and he was able to victimize these endpoints on the internet by getting malware loaded onto them that allowed him to control that computer. So how would he load malware on a computer? Well, he had help. He had help from the victim owner of that device. What he did was he created a small application. I won't tell you exactly what it was, but think of a calculator or a game that you might want to play. He created an application that you could download for free. But what none of the victims knew is that while his application was fun and it was a neat little game, he had malware hidden inside of it that allowed him access 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to their computer. And so with that access, he could use the computing power of thousands of machines connected on the internet to do things. Some of those things obviously were nefarious. That's why he was a hacker. But he had this connection of a collection of computers known as a botnet, and the person who controls those computers is called a bot herder. So what did he do with all these computers? Well, one of the things that he did was a denial of service attack. And so he attacked a couple of very well-known websites at the time that he disagreed with. He didn't like what they had to say and the information that they were putting out on the internet. So he attacked them with a denial of service attack. So if we're just talking about a denial of service attack coming from one computer, it's relatively easy to defend against. We have many, many requests for information coming from that one computer, kind of overwhelms the victim computer, and it's unable to respond to legitimate requests. So if you've ever tried to go to your banking website or maybe even your email website and had trouble getting in because there were too many demands, that's a denial of service attack. Well, he would do that intentionally. We can defend against the denial of service attack coming from one computer at one IP address by simply banning all the traffic coming from that IP address. But what he did was actually a distributed denial of service attack. Distributed means that he harnessed the computing power and the IP addresses of thousands of computers and had all of them sending requests to the victim web server at one time. So it was impossible to just turn off or block one IP address or two IP addresses. There were literally thousands that would have to be blocked. So what happened to the victim's web server was that it was basically knocked offline and couldn't function. So what's the danger, or what is the outcome when a web server is knocked offline? Well, if it's a business server that's selling products, then those products can no longer get sold, resulting in a lack of revenue for the seller. Another part of that is all of the legitimate customers that go there are blocked because of excessive requests, and so they can't get the data that they want access to. So if it's their bank and they can't get access to their accounts to pay their bills, then they start to consider that banking institution as unreliable. If they have a bank that's unreliable, is it someone that they're going to continue to do business with? Maybe not. They may change to a different bank. So the victim then loses the ability to conduct their daily business, whether it's processing orders or allowing access to bank accounts. And then they also can lose customers. And we all know that our customers are important. They're very expensive to get and retain, and we want to retain all the customers that we have. So Nightmare launched a distributed denial of service attack, which was very difficult to defend against. And he successfully knocked a couple of web servers offline until such point that they could stop the attack. So that's what we saw before we were able to actually forensically evaluate some of his computers. Once we were able to forensically evaluate his machines, what we found is that he was also into credit card fraud. And I know we've probably all received notifications from our financial institutions about some fraudulent charges that show up, and then we have to cancel our credit card or debit card and have a new one issued. And the reason that happens is that someone else has gotten hold of that card number and tried to use it. Well, with Nightmare, he didn't have just one card or 5 cards, but tens of thousands of card information on his machines. He had somehow acquired so many of these credit card and debit card data that he could have financed a very luxurious life, and probably was financing a much more luxurious life than he deserved with that stolen credit card data, victimizing people all around the globe by misusing those credit cards. So exactly how he did that was a little bit unclear, but it is possible that the malware that he had gotten installed on people's computers when he was creating his botnet could have also been responsible for acquiring the credit card data through watching web traffic, or even having a keystroke logger that picked up every keystroke that their victims entered onto their machine, which would include their credit card number, zip code, CVV code, and so on, so that that credit card could be misused. So in countries all around the world, there are laws that protect us from criminal behavior. Here in the US, the Federal Crimes Code is mostly contained in Title 18 of the United States Code. For Nightmare's case, we specifically applied 2 different specific codes to what he did. Title 18 United States Code 1030 is known as the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which has been around for many years. But this covers the gambit of hacker-related activities. And so because of his botnet activity and taking down a couple of web servers, he was charged under Section 1030. The credit cards were actually charged under Section 1029, which is titled Access Device Fraud. In this case, the access devices, although I have a little key icon there, the access devices were actually the credit cards. The way that statute is written, if a person unlawfully has 15 or more credit cards in their possession, or the data from 15 or more credit cards, they can be charged under this section. And so Nightmare was charged in federal court and convicted of violations of both laws. So his activity earned him maybe some satisfaction on his part for being able to carry out his activities, but it also earned him a prison sentence. Again, crime doesn't pay, and it certainly didn't for Nightmare. So some questions I often get about hackers is, why do they do what they do? What is it that they want? And so I kind of boiled down what hackers want to a simple, straightforward answer. And that is, they want resources that don't belong to them. Those resources may be other computers, like Nightmare had created his botnet. Those resources of other computers were very important to him because that's what enabled him to carry out other criminal activity. Other resources that hackers want would include money, financial resources. That's a very common one as well. So hackers are motivated by generally about 5 different motivations that we can apply across the board to all hackers. The first one is greed. They're after money, whether they're able to get access to your bank account or an account on Amazon and order things that you didn't order and send it to their address, or even get access to computers to mine cryptocurrency, generate wealth that way. Greed is a big motivator for them. Hacktivism is another motivator. We've seen a tremendous amount of hacktivism over the last several years, where the hacker has a particular political or ideological perspective, and they find websites or people who don't agree with that, and so they attack their online presence, whether it's on social media or a website or even their personal assets, for the purpose of either making it more difficult for them to communicate or dissuading them from talking about their position altogether. Hackers also like to get revenge against people that they feel have wronged them. This is also a common motivator for hackers. One of the motivations that we don't see as much as we think we would is corporate espionage. Certainly there's some out there, but we don't see a lot of hackers purely for the purpose of finding a company's secrets and then selling them to their company. We don't see a lot of that activity going on. We do see a lot of hackers, however, seeking challenge. They're trying to test their wits against the secure design of whatever network they're trying to penetrate. Maybe it's a financial institution, maybe it's a governmental agency, but we do see a lot of hackers trying to challenge themselves and figure out the puzzle that an unknown network would present to them. So I know we talked a little bit about a botnet and credit card fraud in the case of Nightmare, but there are lots of other kinds of cyber fraud that we see and that we have concerns about at Ingram Micro. So one very common and dangerous method of engaging in fraud is phishing and spoofing. I'm sure that most people at this point have an understanding of what phishing is, or at least they've heard the term, but just to review it quickly, phishing is an email campaign that is designed to get a victim to click on a link or click on an attachment that contains malware or downloads malware to their system. That malware could be ransomware encrypting their data as well as other computers' data. It could be something that collects their credentials that they log into a system with. But there are lots of different things that phishing and malware can do if you go ahead and click on a link or a document that's attached to an email. So we have to be careful about that. Theft of computing resources we addressed a little bit, but this is huge. I've seen this many times where a computing asset, particularly one in the cloud, because they can be designed to be very hefty cloud resources, the ability to produce a significant amount of cryptocurrency by crypto mining. The problem is that that generates a tremendous amount of compute cycles, generating a very large bill for whoever owns that cloud resource. Very effective way for these guys to generate a fair amount of income is by stealing those resources. Of course, malware is used in a lot of different things when it comes to cyber fraud and cybercrime. Malicious software can do a variety of different things to our machines and to our servers. It can steal data in the form of a keystroke logger. It could encrypt files in the form of ransomware. It could cause computers to malfunction and systems to shut down. Just the many different types of malware out there are, just voluminous. So many different types of things that they can do. So we have to be very careful of them, and we use tools to prevent them from working on our computers. Another form of fraud that comes up seasonally is the charity or disaster fraud. We often see this when there's a disaster or an event with a lot of human impact, such as a train derailment or hurricane that does damage, or wildfires even. What we see is an attacker will send emails out to intended victims and try to get them to contribute funds to the charity or disaster that they're advertising, so that they take advantage of people's emotions and interest in helping other people, so that the attackers help themselves to free funds. So we addressed ransomware a little bit in an earlier slide, but ransomware does a couple of different things. One, once it is launched on a computer, it encrypts as many files as it can. Oftentimes, ransomware is designed to spread over the network to other computers. When that happens, it encrypts all of those computers. So when it comes to fighting ransomware, speed is of the essence. Because it spreads so frequently and so quickly, the sooner we can start isolating machines that have ransomware, the better off we are. And this comes back to when and how we should report security events to the Security Operations Center. It has to be as soon as possible, as quickly as you detect something is going wrong and you believe it to be a security incident, like these things that we're talking about. It is important to call the Security Operations Center and let them know, so that they can take action to stop the spread or the damage that malware like ransomware can do. Something else that ransomware can do is it can exfiltrate your data. So if you have very important company secrets on your computer, in addition to encrypting them, it can also exfiltrate that data out of your computer and to a server that's controlled by the hacker. Once that happens, they can release that information to embarrass your company, that their company secrets are out there and available for people. They can share them for free, or they can sell them to the highest bidder on the internet. And that person who bought your data can use that against you. It could be a competitor, could be a nation state that wants your secret sauce. So ransomware is a very large threat to organizations everywhere, and even for people at home. So we need to be careful when it comes to ransomware. Business email compromise is the last thing that I'll talk about here. But this is a social engineering attack that convinces someone, usually someone who has access to bank accounts or finances, to take some action on behalf of who they believe to be an executive, like a CEO or a vice president. So typically they will get an email or a WhatsApp message or Teams message from the hacker, and they will ask them to do something a little bit unusual in sending funds to them or changing account numbers. And when that happens, of course, if it's successful, the hacker gets the proceeds or is able to get access to the account in question and funnel money from that account into their account. So I've seen these occur. Again, if something like this happens, it's important to notify the Security Operations Center if it's unsuccessful, and if it's successful, it's also obviously necessary to report to the Security Operations Center. But we want you to report in both circumstances because we need to know when things like this are going on so that we can warn other people. So those are 6 types of cyber fraud that can occur, not a comprehensive list. We could talk for a long time on all of the different types of cyber fraud or crime that are out there. But these are 6 of the most threatening techniques that we are seeing today. So the next logical question is, what can we do to protect ourselves? I thought about this and I thought I would just break it into 4 kind of easy to remember things. So the categories that I want you to remember are report, emotion, vigilant, and update. And if you took the first letter from each of those words, it would spell out review. So I want you to review your security every day. REVU. So things to keep in mind. Under reporting, we want you to report events like phishing emails to InfoSec immediately. Even if you don't click on it, if you receive something you believe to be a phishing email, report it to us. Let us know. The tools that we use to counter phishing attacks learn from 2 different places. One, they learn from things that are out there on the internet. They see attacks going on, they learn from those. And so they enter those indicators into the software and it picks up on things that look similar. But the other way that it learns what an attack is going to look like is from reports of employees who are getting them. So every report is helpful in improving our response to phishing and preventing those emails from ever reaching inboxes. So at home, you probably don't have the same robust set of security tools that we have in the corporate environment. So if you get a phishing email, you can report it to local authorities or the Internet Crime Complaint Center to make a report. If you're a victim, I would recommend that you make a report to the Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is ic3.gov. The second category here is emotion. You want to pay attention to your emotional response to the words in a communication from an unknown person. That might be an email or a Teams message or WhatsApp or a regular text message, right? They try to use social engineering techniques to take advantage of your emotions. Generally, people want to help people. They especially want to help people who have been harmed and who are victims. They didn't do anything to deserve the bad luck that has befallen them. So victims of natural disasters or even someone that they purport to be a relative will find themselves in a bad situation, and this email or communication will try to get you to help them. Another tactic that they use is that they indicate that an account that you have is going to be billed unexpectedly or locked out unexpectedly. And they tell you that if you don't respond to this communication immediately, you'll lose access to your funds or your account or whatever. So pay attention to those. If you find your emotions starting to grow in response to the communication from someone, be very cautious because they're trying to socially engineer you into being a victim. So just slow down, do some extra checks on the email, make sure it came from somebody you thought, make sure they're not asking inappropriate questions, and be aware of that. The next column is vigilant. So watch for the next attack. We are all going to be attacked. Most of us are being attacked on a daily basis. So it's coming, just watch for it, know how to identify it, and avoid it. The last column is update. At work, we here in the corporate environment, we take care of your updates for you. Please allow those updates to come through. Many of those updates are security in nature. Some, of course, are performance improvements or enhancements to the product, but many of them are security updates. Please allow those to update whenever you get a notification to do that. Also, don't try to uninstall security tools. We make it very difficult for that to happen. Sometimes we do see that people try to do it. That's not helpful for us. It's not helpful for you. So just leave the security tools in place and let all of the updates occur. At home, you want to keep all of your software updated, your operating system updated, and you also want to use security tools that are updated, like antivirus and other tools to keep your systems safe. So with that, I'd like to thank you for attending today, and I hope that you got some valuable information out of this discussion on cyber fraud.